I'm Mindy from Hospice of Missoula, and thank you for coming tonight. We do these conversations as an outreach to the community to try to lessen the taboo around the subject of death and aging in our community, because we believe it's, you know, as much of a natural part of life as bringing a baby into the world is transitioning into the next, whatever we might think that is different for each family. But we want to talk about the great parts of it, what makes it better for people, and yoga is such a wonderful piece that so many people can do in so many different ways. So when the topic came up and when Dena came into my life and they kind of fell together, I was excited to invite her to come, and she was excited to do that. And then our facilitator Amanda and I have been friends for a very long time, and she was doing her master's in social work working at the hospital as well, and she was just diving into yoga and doing her training to be an instructor as well. So Dena Saedi is from Red Willow. I'm practicing her name in my head, so I got it right. And there's two parts of the Red Willow Center. One's the Learning Center and one's the Healing Center. And I believe she really works at both, actually. She can talk a little more about that, but we're lucky to have her here tonight. She's prepared a little talk, and then we'll open it up to conversation so we can talk more about what she shares with us and how maybe we can start to incorporate it into our lives and that of the elders in our life, and how to kind of put the thoughts into action for us. So thanks for coming. MCAT does video this and then shares it with the community for those that can't make it in and might not have thought that this would be an interesting conversation for them, but then find that it is useful for them. So if you don't want to be involved or videoed with your questions, you can just raise your hand now and he won't show your face. But I promise there's no intimate close-ups or anything of those sorts, unless you want one. Then you can raise your hand now. Okay, so we'll just keep it calm.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I think I know most of you guys. I'm just going to go ahead and start and talk about how yoga and yoga philosophy relates to end of life. Just a little disclaimer. So anything I'm saying, any of these topics and these practices, they could pertain and be modified for either the person who's in hospice, the person who's dying, or the people that they leave behind. So they're general concepts, and we can maybe have some Q&A about that later if you want more specifics. Yoga says that we're basically three essential parts. We're mind, body, and spirit. And the practice of yoga is the integration of these three parts. And when you practice yoga, you experience an evolution of consciousness, okay? And if I was going to give you kind of one big idea of what we're trying to do with yoga at end of life, it's basically a surrendering, it's a letting healing in, it's an allowing, it's a stepping back and witnessing, okay? Non-resistance, basically, you know. And I always want to give a little disclaimer about yoga when I talk to people about yoga for the first time, because we are in the United States of America after all. And it's this little story that they say the first yogis that came to the States, they said, you know, we're going to change America with yoga. And then the joke is that America changed yoga instead. And then we have this image of the thin woman and these crazy contortions, and that's truly not what yoga was ever meant to be. You know, it's a quieting of the mind and coming closer to your true self. The Yoga Sutras, which is basically like our Bible, they got two core principles of the Yoga Sutras, and that is non-attachment and practice. So non-attachment is it's this awareness that all suffering comes from attachment. And practice is going to look different for every single person. There's 4 categories that I'll talk about. Basically breath work, the postures, the different positions with the body. There's relaxation work and meditation, okay? And it's something you do, some combination of all of the above that the person does in their individual practice that honors their present experience. And what qualifies it as a yogic practice is that there is some intention that you put into the practice. Okay. This idea of non-attachment is a little bit bigger, and all suffering comes from attachment, and as a culture, we're extremely attached in the West. We have a cultural misperception that attachment equals love and love equals attachment, and if you unattach, if you're not attached, then you don't love or you don't care. And that's something that we try to skillfully learn to ask ourselves is, are these sensations, are these feelings, are they attachments or are they love? And that's something that is different for every individual, that process. So we depend on the wisdom of the body to accept that love will continue despite our attachment continuing. It's this attachment, the yogic philosophy says, that anchors us to our pain. And yoga is the inner journey that severs us from that anchor. Okay? So we want to demystify our relationship with our grief through this practice, not change our relationship with that love and that connection that we have with that person. I don't know if people have questions as we go, or if somebody was compelled to say something or ask something. I want you guys to feel free to do that.
You know, this isn't anything that I thought of yoga. I thought it's positioning, exercising, stretching muscles.
Yeah.
For fitness.
Yeah.
So is this from India?
Well, I mean, yoga was born in India, but I'll talk in a few minutes about a type of yoga that came from Persia. I mean, it's from the East, but yeah, India's essentially. And it's just morphed into something completely different in recent years. You know, I mean, we've got Bikram yoga, which the philosophies behind it are just, you know, there's all different kinds of yoga. There's yoga fusion with different modalities at the same time. So yeah, we've morphed it into all kinds of things, but this is closer to therapeutic yoga, the roots of yoga, you know.
So is it, how does it correlate with meditation? Is it the same thing?
We're gonna get there. Yeah, yeah, that's part of it. And it's kind of like all roads lead to meditation. You don't always start there with a person because it's difficult. But we can talk about that a little bit more too. Thank you. Okay, so kind of placing yoga therapy and where it comes into the grief process. I'll put it in the context of William Worden has 4 tasks of the grieving process. So accepting, processing the pain, adjusting, and making meaning. So where the yoga therapy comes in is processing the pain. And I just want to share, Steve Levine wrote a book, Healing into Life and Death, and worked in hospice for many decades. And in terms of processing the pain, he says that we try to touch pain with mercy instead of fear. And a couple sentences from his book. Each direct experience of the vastness of being is a healing which brings us closer to the life spark growing at the center of each cell. Each moment we enter our pain with merciful awareness is a moment of healing. And like I said before, this work is so much about the surrendering, the non-resistance, because in this situation at the end of life, pretty much everyone involved, the resistance comes up like it's never probably come up before, and you're just filled with resistance, your feelings, your emotions, your behaviors, and we're trying to get to a place where we're not reacting and we're not resisting and we're allowing, you know, the experience to be what it is. So, you know, if you think about what you are facing at the end of life, you're facing grief, you're facing trauma, and you're facing stress, right? There's definitive, well, any mind and body practitioner is going to believe that any life-changing event is going to affect most, if not all, systems of the body. And we know it's been proven that in the case of trauma, there needs to be some somatic component, there needs to be some body work for the person to get past their trauma, to truly heal from their trauma. And we know with stress that the relaxation techniques that we do in yoga, they lessen the stress. So all of these things kind of come together, and what are we trying to do? We're trying to get presence. We're trying to create an outlet to release emotions, try to create a sense of control, bring balance to the mind and body, and restoration, restore through relaxation. And so the 4 different activities of the yoga therapy that we would do is the breath work. And with the breath work, we call it pranayama in yoga, but it's basically different techniques of breath. We are introducing this aspect of control. And it's a frightening loss of control that people feel around end of life. And breathing is automatic. You know, we don't think about it. It's unconscious. So when you bring consciousness to breathing, you are bridging the gap between the conscious and the unconscious. And this is in large part of how yoga works as a healing tool. Many times people say, I don't know why, I feel so much better, and it's along these lines, right? You don't need to know why. Just fall into your breath and doing the breathing exercises. You know, different things come from this, are born from this breath work, is you create balance, coping mechanisms, building patience and awareness. The breath affects the nervous system, and this is probably like across the board in yoga work, yoga therapy, this effect that we have on the nervous system and neuroplasticity. It's why it works physiologically. It's the scientific explanation for why it works. It's this idea that when body work is done specifically and repeatedly, new neural pathways are going to be created in the brain. And this is already being practiced in mainstream medicine with pain, chronic pain. Me and Mindy just been to the conference here in town from the pain clinic and neuroplasticity, and it's there, it's happening, and it works in the same way with grief. As well as breath work, the asana poses, which is basically the poses, getting your body into these different positions. There's always going to be symptoms of the person who is dying. They're going to have symptoms in their body that we can find ways to get them relief, and as well as the people that are grieving. So that's going to be super individualized. What does the person need? What is going to work for them at that time? And it could be holding a posture. It could be movement. It could be various things, combining that with breath. So it just depends on what's working for the individual. We're trying to tap into the body's innate wisdom. And as we do so, we monitor the sensations and the feelings, the thoughts, and always coming back to this place of non-resistance, always coming back to this place of allowing whatever is there, presence, feeding that presence so that it can build in some way. And honing that connection, the subtle energy, the awareness between the mind and the body. In addition to the different poses, there is the relaxation work that is amazing for stress. You know, depression will come in these environments, and tons of stress hormones are getting throwing around in your body when there's depression. Anguish, grief, bringing those attitudes of mindfulness techniques. As an example, something that you would do for a relaxation technique with somebody who's experiencing grief is we might do restorative yoga. So restorative yoga means you use different props to open up different parts of the body, and they just stay in that position for a while. And we might use the chakra system. The chakras that we have all along our center of our body, they're energy centers, and this is a map to understand the mind, body, and spirit that we'll use in yoga. So in the case of grief, we can oftentimes pinpoint the heart chakra, and we might do like a heart opening type of restorative pose for the person towards their healing. Well, I thought now we can do a little bit of breath work ourselves, and then I'll continue on. I'll talk a little bit about meditation. After that, would you guys like to do that? Okay, nice. So in that case, it's nice that you can find a straight spine. We'll do 3-part breathing, complete breathing. You could do this laying down, but we're just going to do it for a few minutes and see if you can kind of set those vertebrae one on top of the other, and if you could find a way to plant those feet firmly into the ground. And start by closing the eyes. If you don't want to close the eyes, you could just kind of gaze down and soften the eyelids. Soften all the muscles around the eye sockets. And simply begin to connect with your breath as your breath is at this present moment. Not trying to manipulate it in any special way. Observe your breath's natural rhythm. And we'll start to direct the breath a little bit right now. If you want to take your hands and bring them to your belly, breathing fully but naturally, send that breath as low as it'll go, just so that you could feel your belly protruding any amount as you inhale and your belly moving back in as you exhale. It's exploring this bottom third of the lungs. And then take your hands to your rib cage, and we're going to direct the breath to the middle of the lungs, just enough so that you can feel your ribs gently reaching out with the inhale and coming back in on the exhale. And to distinguish the uppermost reaches of our lungs, if you want to bring your hands around your collarbone, see if you can direct that breath to the very top third of your lungs. And you can go ahead and rest your hands back onto your legs. And we're going to try to inhale in 3 parts. So just go in at your own pace. Inhale the first third in the belly, rib cage, then collarbone, and then exhale everything out. If you start to feel forced, just take a little step back, inhaling belly, ribs, chest, and everything out. And continue in this way, and when you exhale, see that your belly is the first thing to come back towards your spine. Inhabit the present breath that you are taking at this moment. See that you're exhaling fully with each exhale. And by exhaling fully, can you commit to completely letting go of what no longer serves you? And in this moment, can you simply envision the end of your suffering, just for a moment? And come back to your natural breath, coming back to your space. Make any move that you'd like to make with your body. And with that, I could just segue right into the meditation. So meditation is probably the chief technique to address the spirit of the mind, body, spirit. And ultimately, it's our most powerful tool. And the more that you could hone this muscle, these muscles of the brain when you meditate, the more that you'll be able to stay with the difficult emotions. Okay? The letting in, the allowing, you know, and we do this through stillness, through finding stillness. A lot easier said than done. So a lot of the body work is kind of a preparation to get to that point that you could find that stillness with the meditation, you know. You know, when you get into these topics of spirituality, it could be a little sticky, I think, in the West, I think for me anyway. And I think about some of the leaders of the meditation movement. I think of Jon Kabat-Zinn, the mindfulness master, Richard Miller, who's, you know, one of the first great yoga therapists that has single-handedly brought yoga therapy to the military. And I see how both of these masters, they've been masters with language, right? They have found ways to put the languaging of non-attachment, essentially, into something that people could understand and that people are willing to try. Jon Kabat-Zinn created an entire pain program around mindfulness, mindfulness meditation, you know, names 8 different kind of attitudes of mindfulness, you know, something everybody wants to have: acceptance, letting go, surrender. Richard Miller, he came to the U.S., the military actually came to him because through VA centers, they found that a lot of the soldiers were healing from PTSD quicker and more completely than they were from any other type of work. So they approached him and they said, what can we do? This stuff works, this stuff that you're doing, this yoga, but we can't call it yoga. So he had to come up with a whole new name for it, and he did, integrative restoration, and then to put a integrative, and actually they put a spin on it, iRest. And it's written kind of just like the iPod, the small I rest for short. So had to put it into a language that people understand, basically. Stephen Levine, the author that I cited earlier, he says, illness causes us to confront our most assiduous doubts about the nature of the universe and the existence of God. It tears us open. It teaches us to keep our heart open in hell. So if the individual who's grieving or who is dying has already their own spiritual belief system in place that could be utilized through all of this work, if they don't have their own spiritual belief system in place, and they're open, through that openness, something can be created that could help them heal. It's that openness, it's that surrender that creates that integration with the mind, body, and the spirit. You know, any Eastern philosophy, and if anybody's done different types of meditation in the past, you know, we're constantly experiencing, we have cravings and aversions, cravings and aversions. And the mind and body are always craving something, or, you know, trying to get away from something else. It's this idea that the spirit needs nothing. And by identifying with our spirit, we get in touch with that aspect of ourselves that's already satisfied, right? And this is the intention that we try to put into the practice, you know, each individual's practice, that we're trying to touch that part of ourselves that knows no loss, okay? Which is very much a part of ourselves, but we have to kind of peel the layers to get to that part of ourselves. And we do this through the body work and the meditation. And it's experiential, you know. Nobody is going to explain it to you. You're not going to get it in a book. You have to do it and experience it. And it's not instantaneous either. But if the intention is there and the drive is there and the person wants to heal, this is a great route to go. Requires some openness and definitely some faith. you know. And that's what I got. You know, I'm really happy that I got to share this with you all. Yeah, so it's really important, I think, for this type of work. Oh, and I have a meditation that I don't know, maybe we'll do a little bit later if you guys want to do a short meditation a little bit later, but maybe we'll open it up for now.
So it's soft a little bit.
Yeah. And maybe we won't, depending on time. Yeah.
So is this something a person can learn to do on their own, or do you need a coach?
Gosh, that's a great question. I'm a yoga therapist, and I've been trained in this type of thing, and I know that in the tradition of yoga, it's always coming back to you need a teacher. And this I don't think would be any different. So I think you would need some guidance, not unlike the guidance that the people at Hospice provide. You know, this is just a different modality than some of the other things that are being practiced towards healing in grief. But yeah, I would think you do need someone to help and guide, you know. But all the hard work is the individual, you know.
So one of the things that I mean, this is very intriguing, but the skeptic in me, because we all have that little part, says you're going to somebody that's struggling with, or maybe not outwardly, but dying. This seems to me that it would be a very long-term process to get to that. You know, I've tried some meditation, not a lot, but you know, clearing that mind is like, how do you stop all that? That it would take some time and practice. And so I'm thinking of this dying person. Now, so talk about that that you don't have to have years to get this this help for that person.
The person
going
grieving.
through that. Yeah.
I think I can speak to that a little bit. As I was a hospice social worker and I teach yoga, and I actually wrote my master's thesis on cancer patients and yoga therapy for depression and anxiety. And when I did hospice social work, I don't think I ever told the patient, I'm doing yoga with you right now, but certainly in a lot of moments it was a lot of, let's just sit here and let's just take some breaths. You're feeling really overwhelmed. Let's just see if we can just get through this minute and breathe together, and then we'll talk more. Or whatever it was, or using pressure point therapy, or you know, just doing really small things that helped them just focus on one thing, focus on their bodies, focus on their breathing. And in that moment, I mean, they're definitely doing yoga, they're definitely having that moment of unity in their mind and body and spirit. So I think that there are little ways. I don't, you know, especially in Montana, you wouldn't typically go to any elderly person and say, I'm going to teach you yoga today. You know, I know you can't get out of bed, because that just doesn't. But I think saying relaxation techniques, and you do kind of just play your audience a little bit too.
Yeah.
I was wondering about an elder with dementia. And have you worked with elders with dementia? And elders with dementia who are dying?
I haven't personally, but even if they have dementia, we can help them drop into their present experience, you know, through breath, or if they had a lot of energy, then through movement. And yeah, it would be appropriate as well to do this if they were game, you know. And like Amanda said, you don't need to tell them it's yoga.
And I also think of it a lot as for the caregivers, because how difficult to be in that moment of caregiving and watching that, and to be able to be open and not be attached to. I think we talk a lot about non-attachment is such a difficult concept, because of course we're attached to these people and we love them and they're dying, and it's you're not going to unattach per se. What the non-attachment is really referring to is the non-attachment to the outcome. So can I just let this be what it is? Can I just say they are going to die? And can I just not attach to trying to change it? Just for right now, just for this minute. So I think that is really where some powerful pieces can come in. with caregivers.
Can you talk a little bit more about non-attachment? Because I didn't understand that initially either. Because I always, I think in Western society, especially, or maybe being a mom and having a list of 17 things to do, I'm always not only multitasking, but I'm constantly thinking, oh, I just got a text that says this. That means I've got to change the way I go home. So I pick this up so I can do that. Or I got this response from my friend, and now that means she needs me to change her. She's mad at me now. Oh, that makes me feel bad. And I'm wondering, you know, and I'm just constantly like changing how I feel based on what that message was. And it's really about not, you know, riding my emotional roller coaster based on what the input is all the time. It's just, it's not even input. It's just there, you know. And, oh, checked in, made a note of it. Moving on, because it's not actually something that changes the outcome of anything. It's just someone Not writes a lot of books about trying to be there, and like when you're standing at the sink washing the dishes, like don't be in 17 different places. Just like be there to wash the dishes, and like try to have a moment there. And it's pretty amazing how simple and powerful that can be, but it's really hard when you're trained to try to do so many things. Training yourself is really difficult.
Yeah.
One thing with dementia, I guess I think that is they are in the moment because they don't
It's all
have
there.
memory. So they're always there, yeah, in the moment. My mother had dementia and she passed away a year ago in December, December 2012. And she didn't die of end stages Alzheimer's. She died of another disease process. But what I saw with her, and she was on hospice from September to December, somewhere in the earlier part, she woke up. So when I'd go to see her, I'd stay with her at night. She got up in the morning and said, "This is not a good place to be." And I was trying to figure out what to say. And within 15, 20 seconds, she says, "But I don't know if where I'm going is any better." And I then kind of thought, I knew, and Dad had died a year prior to that, and my daughter had seen him in a dream, and I said, "I think Dad thinks that it is okay." And so that let go. But I really had the distinct feeling with my mom. She lost her words toward the end, that she really liked having her body. And that someone put some fresh flowers on the table in the dining area, and we brought one over, and she just studied it, you know, just using her senses to study that beautiful rose, or it wasn't a rose, it was a red colored flower. And then once I came in after being out of the room, and she was sitting in her recliner, but with her feet on the floor, and we had a lot of Christmas music going. And here she was dancing with her feet, you know, that, and so once again, her body, but eventually, of course, she did let go of her body, she had to. But I was just wondering if relaxation, she had one bout of really strong agitation during this in the weeks leading up to her death. And I think that was also part of her saying, "I've got to go." And the agitation was about that. Getting the train tickets, finding those sorts of things. So I don't know. I don't know. One of the things that I looked for her, and I found a couple of vignettes, just short things that she could hear, and she listened to them. I think she understood them about the dying process, in case she was afraid of the actual process. And then said a prayer that was good for her a lot. That I knew she had. But I don't know. Then I see elders, you know, with dementia who aren't in the dying process with agitation. And so I was wondering that about if that, how and if that could work for them.
It'd be a great study.
It would be a great study. We talk a lot. Our aides have had such great success with singing in the shower because shower time is always such a fight between patients with dementia and their caregivers because their experience is that they're overstimulated, but the singing seems to just be something they can focus on and it's familiar and they just go right into the song and they're somewhat oblivious to whatever else is going on around them and they're able to shower them quickly with no resistance. But I go back to Ira Bayak on the Consider the Conversation video talks a lot about as elders are aging, they kind of regress back into their childhood and then back into their infancy where they can only think about, they can't multitask a big list and then they can only do one thing and then they can only be concerned about, I'm tired and I need to sleep now, and that's not undignified that they can't toilet themselves anymore. They're just, human now. And what I appreciate about our preschool is their whole curriculum is based back to mindfulness and
Really?
bringing the kids back to breath, and that when they do get overstimulated and agitated, just inviting the kids back to finding their breath and helping them to focus on their breath first and then hearing what you can say because they can't hear what you say. And since I've been able to pay attention to it, it does make a difference when I wait until I know that he's listening, until I start instructing him, because he can't listen when he's tantruming. It just can't happen. And I would think with an old person that's in fear or in a different place, they can't listen either until they're, comfortable. And we talk so much at hospice, when we meet people, they're in some sort of crisis, and it's unreasonable for them to be able to make these big life decisions or talk about their spiritual self when they're in the midst of a crisis. So, we need to have them comfortable with us and take care of whatever crisis they're in so that we can have that bigger conversation. But, if you can at least control your breath, I feel like that's at least something. And really there shouldn't be, if my 3-year-old can control his breath, I feel like there's hope for anybody, even laying in a bed, to be able to learn to control their breath. Or their caregivers to control their breath, so that they're at least in a place where they can be mindful of how they're going to care for them. I think that that's such a good, I hadn't even thought about the caregivers or the grieving person behind them. I'm so glad you brought that up, because it is a powerful tool to help. Because you can't always help that person if they're not open to it, but those around them can be.
Anyone else have a kind of experience where you've seen yoga or mindfulness with an older adult or?
I'm sorry to admit so much, but I'm hearing you talk about breath since I've arrived, and just recognizing that music and live music and the ability to do that with people has so much to do with their breath, right? And that's just another avenue in people to work with their breath.
What's it like for you when you do the 3-part breathing? Did anyone find that really interesting to just, for that 4 or 5 minutes, just pay attention to that? If noticing how, if it's calming, if it's clearing, if it's frustrating, because frustrations come up in meditations, or I know for me, breathing like that makes my back hurt, so that's what I always am like, all right, it's gonna pass. You can't attach to your back hurting, you just have to be here. So it's those things that can come up for us, and it's all different, and it's all okay, and not judging and saying, oh, you're being silly that your back's hurting. It's just noticing it and staying.
Well, and I think the breathing is really something that people, I think, are really in tune to. And because I think we do it somewhat naturally, how many times without really knowing what you were doing, where you had somebody and you had them focusing and take a deep breath. You know, we did it with little kids with an injury, I'm scared, and you know, it's take a deep breath, and it's such a natural, it just seems just so appropriate to flow into that it would be, I think, an easy thing to approach people. It's not going to be a totally foreign thing that you're asking them to do.
And that it works with their own belief system. That's what it's so complementary to wherever they're at, too. It's not something that threatens where they are. But the attachment thing is so interesting to me because so much of school right now is based on attachment theory and how, like, everything and everybody comes back to where you were secure from. And if you want to figure out where your problems are, figure out where your attachment went wrong and go back there and either try to fix it or figure out where it went wrong and where you can fill that void in your life. And it's so opposite of this mindset of just maybe being okay with it instead of trying to fix it.
Totally counterintuitive to everything that we've ever like been told or practiced. Yeah.
But I mean, everybody's trying to make a buck on fixing it.
Yeah.
Well, and giving up that ownership, you don't have to own, like you said, all these texts, all this overstimulation. You know, I think that's kind of like letting that mind go blank would be just really need a lot of discipline and practice. Because we do, you know, pretty soon our poor minds have this list that's 20 things long and the phone's still ringing.
Or like with your cancer, if you don't beat your cancer, you're a failure.
Exactly.
It's so unfair to, I mean,
Well, we
just
sell-
on that talk today, that's so unfair.
We have
to
such
put
a
in
big
people's
party for
minds.
survivors.
Mhm.
Well, you know, and that's great, but they aren't better than the ones that didn't. They didn't work harder.
Well, I guess we're never all gonna win that is the thing, so why should we battle in the first place? Because none of us are getting out alive.
Yeah.
But the analogy to that, detaching from attachment, and I like a lot is, if you were driving down the road and you got a flat tire, would you go back and try to figure out like why you got a flat tire and then remedy that, or would you just fix your tire and like move on? And that's what we all do. We fix the tire and move on, but we don't do that for ourselves. And I think that that is sort of nice to me to think like, oh yeah, flat tire, like I can get through that. It's a more physical analogy for me.
I think it's really important to have some kind of idea of what attachment issues or what it's really about. I mean, through my education, when I was going to graduate school, it's helping me right now. You know, I've recently lost my mother, and you know, with some of the things I learned in school is in place right now and helping me move forward. And I like what you said about, you know, the breathing. You know, I mean, I think that's really important. Being a former athlete myself, I had some education on some of the breathing techniques we used, but I've kind of reached back and kind of used some of that, you know, when things were very stressful in my life. And although, you know, I would like to learn more about it, you know, the breathing exercises and things like that. I think it's really helped me in my life, and you know, getting back to the education and having that ideological perspective on the attachment, you know, concerns. I mean, at this point, it's really helping me get through what's going on in my life.
It's a powerful tool. We learned that at the conference, especially with people that have, you know, any chronic condition, especially with chronic pain, is you learn to compensate for it for so long and you become dependent. Even if something's not giving you a lot of support or relief, it's still something in your mind you're dependent on. So before you take that away, you have to give someone something, you know, to counter it. You can't leave them off balance. And what I like about this is you're building a toolbox. You're saying, I'm empowering you. We're not taking all of this on yet. but here's your tools, and we're like, you are empowering yourself. And I think that that's so great because, you know, you are guiding us all in our own meditation here, or our own breathing exercise. And like where I'm at in this field is nowhere where anybody else is here with me. And it's really powerful that one person is able to take it, like 12 of us or 17 of us here on that place, and she has no idea where she's taking all of us, but we're all able to do work with that still. I think that that's a pretty incredible task when it comes to moving someone. You know, we just talked today about, you know, some of the best social workers are the ones that, you know, you walk away from not knowing how much they actually helped you. You know, you don't really leave someone feeling like, oh, that was a really valuable person. No, you leave feeling like, wow, I'm a really powerful person all of a sudden. And it's like, yeah, that's a successful therapist, is someone who you walk away feeling like you're the one that made the change. And I just think yoga is a really great tool for that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Knowledge is power in some ways. I mean, you know, like we don't need some Eastern philosopher to tell us that everything changes and everybody is going to die, you know, but we're just in this environment of grief, just, you know, any logical thinking is just shattered and scattered, and it's not like, but it's there. It's planted like a seed in your mind, and you could come back to it in your quiet moments.
So cool.
I take a class with Dena of yoga for chronic pain, and I'm not currently in the dying process, at least I'm not aware of it, but I do have chronic pain, and it amazes me how often these relatively simple breath exercises really help my nervous system calm down. Or they should talk about restorative yoga is sort of, you know, putting pillows and props to sort of support the body so that then my body can fully relax. And I would think that these would be things that would be very accessible to many people who are in the dying process. And I don't know if there's someone who is in a severe state of dementia might not be able to join in a breath work, but they might be able to appreciate their body being supported by pillows and someone being present with them. So I think it would be really individual depending on the person who's dying and what they need. But I know my experience is I come in with all this pain, and it's amazing how really simple exercises can help reduce that. And I feel like it would be available to most people.
Well, the classic Lamaze, and one can say, you know, those people are struggling with some dementia when you're in this labor and can't think. But that's what it was about: breathing, controlling your emotions, your pain, and getting through, being in the moment, releasing.
Yeah, I've had many students bring up their Lamaze experience in classes, you know, because that's their breathing experience. You know, maybe they'd never really done yoga, but they had a baby.
Yeah, being in the moment and controlling, and
And that's a pretty intense transition.
Yeah.
We're talking about this as a transition. It's like that's another really intense transition that people have in their lives.
Next to no side effects. I mean, there's no medications that are this strong that don't have the side effects.
And it's something that we have within us. We just don't know how. We don't know how to access it.
I mean, like, how long have you been a nurse? And it sounds like this is the first time you're being exposed to this as a therapeutic.
Oh, well, I've done it all the time. That's one of the first interventions. Somebody's in a crisis, somebody's in pain, somebody's afraid. It's just what you do. You know, it's just the first. You know, let's calm down. Let's take some deep breaths. You know, look at my face. Look at me. You know, be still. Look at me. Look at me.
And it seems like it could also be really helpful for the caregivers, and it would also be something that a caregiver could do with their loved one. I mean, I appreciate, you know, you have a lot of training. Like your question was like, does it take years and years? Like, well, you know, as much time as you've got, I think would be helpful. But I feel like if, you know, Dena came in and was showing me how to breathe with my loved one, and then Dena goes away, I can still do that.
Right.
It's just sort of showing us that this, you know, whatever's available to that person is what we can do. I don't feel like it's not extremely technical.
Yeah.
But it takes some sensitivity to know what's appropriate for this person.
And maybe there's even a situation that it's best facilitated by the caregiver, you know? Maybe for whatever reason, the person in hospice, they don't want to see somebody they don't know, you know? And then you can empower the caregiver with the skills. Why not? Yeah.
One thing that struck me, I've been reading, I've read now 2 books by this Dr. Amatuzio, who is a forensic pathologist in Minnesota, Minneapolis area. And she talks about extraordinary experiences. And when you're saying birth is a really tremendous transition, just as death is. And she said, death isn't the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth, which I thought was very interesting. And the extraordinary experiences are a lot from people who have left behind after someone dies, but a sense of continuing connection in some very real and not so real ways. So essentially she says the spirit, I think, is there before, during life, and after. So, and as a physician, she sometimes her colleagues and peers have expressed skepticism, but she also describes many of her colleagues and peers having had experiences in their own. But one thing I did want to mention, I thought about when you were saying attachment theory.
I'm sorry, I can't hear very well.
Oh, you can't.
I guess I can come over there, but would you mind?
Speaking louder. I always think I'm speaking loud. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
So attachment theory, I think that that's an important theory, and it's important for us as humans when we come in to the world and gain our bodies or whatever. We don't have any sense of what reality is, and we get that from our parents. And it can be really a chaotic reality, it can be a very secure reality, it can be a hit or miss. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it isn't. So an insecure attachment that has to do with trust and all that. So attachment is important, I think, in our lives, in human growth and development. And then there comes a time, though, perhaps when we're into adulthood, and if we have enough resilience based on our attachment in the early years, then we can begin to explore that and perhaps detach from what we wanted, the feeling of what we needed as children. We can detach that way.
And it kind of morphs into kind of a legacy leaving of
Right.
what it meant and how I made something out of it.
Right, right.
Yeah. You know, like a meaning making and
yes, and the strategies that were used just for survival
right.
maybe aren't working so well anymore. So detaching from that, or seeing what the positive things are and keeping those, but letting go of the negative things. So you might feel like you're hearing attachment theory ad nauseum in your schooling, but
it does feel like that sometimes.
But I think it is. I do think it's important. I had a teacher who said once.
I do too. I think that in my working with the elderly, you see those, and I don't know what the term is now, but it used to be the discontented elderly. And I think that those are people that had very difficult rearing and childhood, and it would be a lack of attachment issue.
And trust or distrust.
Yes.
Yeah, anticipating bad things. Yeah. One of my teachers had said we spend about first half of our life building up, to use Freudian language, but our egos, and then the next half of our life slowly taking apart the ego.
Well, I think we in this culture, we overdo attachments, and we don't stop with what we did as children and needed. we don't stop that. We just keep sucking more and more and more to where we are just overflowing with attachments. And, you know, and I think that's some of our culture here. We have too many phones, too many things, too many places to be, too many obligations, you know, too many things we have to do. And I think it's our culture.
So maybe it's two kinds of attachment. One is human attachment, bonding, that sort of thing, versus attachment to material
Right, I
goods,
think there's the
looking for happiness.
necessities. Right, there's those necessary attachments. But then there's all of this busy, run here, tear there, and right, not accepting where we are right now because I have to hurry up and get across town because I have to call my friend who's always pissed at me anyway, so why do I bother? You know, kind of attachments, instead of saying, I'm now driving the car with my children and I'm going to enjoy them because they're singing a nursery rhyme, and isn't it cute? You know, instead of getting yourself all wound up over.
Yogic theory says that the path to happiness is not attachment. You know, that is how we become happy individuals.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
That's how we become happy. The path to happiness in yogic theory is non-attachment.
Right, but what do they say about, say, early childhood development?
There's a difference between love and non-attachment.
Yes.
Yeah, well, this is kind of the work with grief that, you know, the person, you know, they delve into their thought process and it's like you're empowered with the knowledge, you know, and it's going to be different for everybody, for them to think about it and meditate on it and find some stillness and see if they can make those distinct. But in our culture, it's so hard to separate those two, but in yogic theory, they're distinct. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, but I mean, I'm in this culture too. These are concepts that we use to empower ourselves and to heal and to find happiness.
I think I would agree though. It seems like we almost need two different words for the Eastern concept of attachment and the psychological processes of attachment as a kid, because I've run into this conversation before and it's like, they're not quite, they have a different flavor.
Yeah.
You know, they're different,
Yeah.
they're slightly different.
Yeah.
Well,
But we
I
use
think
the
we're
same
not
word.
teaching our children to detach. You know, I think this is an adult concept
Yes.
that maybe children just can't do yet. You know, because
Well, detachment, I think, to a certain degree, is a maturation process too.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. And then the attachment of parent to child. And there's some big, strong attachments for me, even with my adult children, now my grandchildren. I suppose if one of them died, I would have to.
It's human nature.
Yeah.
But isn't that the ultimate accepting it?
Yes, it
and
would be. I just hope I don't have to do it.
And the yogic theory, and I try not to talk about reincarnation with people, but the theory behind it is that you have these lifetimes, and some people, they'll learn non-attachment and they won't come back, and that's what each lifetime is for, is to get closer to that place where we learn this lesson.
You know, I'm sorry I always talk too much, but I have an example that, you know, I spent months in hurt and anger over something that had happened, and finally it was like this epiphany. And I thought, you know, this happened, and I can't change it, and I can't control it, and I can continue to be angry and sad, or I can say, that's part of my past, accept that. And you know, it was like I was a brand new person. You know, it was, but I think that's what I hear with not being attached to something. It was over, I can't change it, I can't control it, it's in the past.
It made you happy.
It was a world of difference, because it was either I cry or I kick and I scream, or I accept, I let it go and live my life in the moment today and tomorrow. And it really was profound.
I have a similar experience, again, in Dena's class, working with physical pain, is what she'll talk about, encourages to have a sense of acceptance around it. And it's amazing how often that happens. It's like the physical pain doesn't go away, but all of the tension around it, if it can soften a bit, it makes my experience much easier in that moment.
And
I
it's
still
that
have, I still have the
accepting.
pain, but I'm not like fighting it. And so I have more relief
Right.
to accept what's happening. And I
That's
feel
so
like that
true.
would be so useful for at any stage of life dealing with pain, but especially at the end of life to have that any kind of
Acceptance.
relief.
And I think you can talk about those love relationships like that, like how much we love our children or love our parents, and that is that strong core. And God, I love them so much. But can I just let go of the expectations on that relationship a little bit and release the tension around that, the expectation of what I want my mom to do or say, or what I want my kids to do or say, or what I need from them, or what I get from them. Can I let go of that attachment? You know, to let go of that love and that beautiful thing that makes all the meaning in our lives. It's letting go of all the little crap that surrounds that and makes it hard.
So it just strikes me, I think it takes a lot of courage, to especially when someone has died or is dying, to continue feeling that love even though the relationship is different. I just want to acknowledge, I feel like it takes so much courage to have that love continue, even though the person is not there physically anymore.
And not let your feelings of sad, depressed, anger get in the way.
Or maybe let them be there too.
There you
Sometimes,
go.
sometimes that's all I can do. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we call that's what we, like the modern day thought on the grief process though, is moving towards a continuing bonds theory as opposed to, the 5 stages of grief, and then you have to go through that denial phase, and then you'll move on and you'll graduate and eventually you'll be done with it. And we don't think that way, at least that's not what they teach us.
And the
not
year's
what I
over, so you can
experienced.
stop wearing black and get over
After
it.
6 months, you can,
Right.
yeah. But you'll flow in and out of it, and holidays will make you feel this way or that way, depending on what your history is. But you still have that bond, and you still have that relationship. It just looks different because it's not the same form as it was before. And I think that for me, who I've experienced losses in people that have not been in life and death, I've still been left with a body that works and not the same person inside of it that I started with. And that has been equally as traumatic as not having a body there anymore. Because it's confusing to me to see the person I love and not have that person there anymore. So I changed this bond because it's still my person, so I still want to honor her, but I have to be different with it. It's that the grief comes and goes and it's different, but it's still my person, So I think it's cool that we can allow ourselves to ebb and flow with that, but it still doesn't change that, I would never have to challenge whether that was like love or attachment, like that's love, What do you guys want to do? On a night or for meditation? I feel like we've done some heavy work here. A lot of stuff here.
Maybe more casual conversation.
Just Or you just ebb and flow up to the bar.
Around the bar.
Sure. I think that that's good.
Yeah.
Your bartender will talk your ear off. Come on up. Well, thank you guys so much
Thank you.
for coming.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.
Yeah, it's really neat to bring something so alternative, which is an alternative, into something that we're here that we shouldn't. So I think it's a nice mesh of uniqueness. It's a really great thing to talk about too, so thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It shows how open you guys